Ladies and gentlemen, we got
Overlord, Season 4.
But yeah, we finally got it. It only took 3 years, but we've finally gotten confirmation that Overlord is coming back to us. So not only are we getting 12 to 13 more episodes of Ainz and his shenanigans, but we're also getting a full-length movie to follow it up as well. Yes, the information regarding both are still rather limited, but what we do know is that the movie won't be a recap like how it was last time. According to the livestream in which all this information was announced, the movie is said to be covering the events of the Holy Kingdom arc. It's the part of the story that covers volumes 12 and 13 for the light novels. So, given that Season 3 ended with Volume 9, that would imply that Season 4 will be covering Volumes 10 and 11, which is actually a rather different approach to adapting the anime than what we're used to. You see, usually each season of the anime speeds through 3 volumes of the novels. It's a level of pacing that unfortunately skips much of the development of the side characters and subplots. But if what they said is true and they're only doing 2 volumes this time, then that would allow for the pacing to be a little bit slower and in turn make for a much more faithful adaptation. That said, this is just speculation based on the tiny bit of info given to us. There is always the possibility that they reorganize the events of the story much like how they did in Season 3. As for what you can expect, well, the anime will be picking things up right from where we left it. Ainz's sudden establishment of a kingdom of his own has opened the door to a whole bunch of new enemies to be faced and nations to be influenced, once again increasing the size and impact of the conflicts. So it'll definitely be entertaining to see how Ainz approaches the world as the ruler of this so-called sorcerer kingdom. Now, aside from that, we do have confirmation that Madhouse will be returning to animated. Personally, I'm hoping that we don't get as many CG monstrosities as we did last time. But honestly, animation isn't really why I watched this show in the first place anyway. I'm much more interested in seeing how they approach the story and how Ainz plans on flexing on his opponents next. For the story in particular, we do know that it'll be handled by the same director and script supervisor as the previous season. But what I'm looking forward to the most is the return of Sobin as the character designer. Not so much to see his influence on the anime, but more so to see more of his new art like this in the months leading up to it. Now, we don't know exactly when the anime will be airing, but if I had to guess, I'd say it's most likely going to be in the first half of next year. Probably in the spring or winter of 2022. The reason I say this is because Madhouse already has an anime coming out in October, so I can't really see Overlord coming out before that. As soon as I know for sure though, I'll definitely let you guys know on the community page here. So be sure to subscribe if you want updates and some potential new Overlord content. Anyway, that's pretty much everything you need to know about Overlord Season 4 so far. But it's not the only piece of news that I had planned for today. There was also all these new previews and announcements that I wanted to talk about as well. So let's speedrun through some of the other new anime revealed over the past month or so. Starting with sequels that got new previews. We have Data Live Season 4 coming out in October. My Next Life as a Villainess Season 2 coming out in July. The second season for I'm Standing on a Million Lives also coming out in July. Then Arifureta Season 2 coming out in January. When it comes to spin-offs, there was also a new trailer for the adaptation of The Honor Student at Magic High School. This being a side story for the irregular that focuses on Miyuki instead of Tatsuya. Moving on to the new anime now. There were quite a few trailers that dropped for Isekai that I'm sure some of you haven't even heard of yet. The first of which is called The Dungeon of Black Company. This is an Isekai where the protagonist is transported to a world of fantasy as a slave instead of a hero. It's a self-aware comedic take on the genre that shows our protagonist as he starts his new life as this hard-working employee of this mining company. Next, we have the VR MMO turned real-life Isekai Kenjin no Denshi, otherwise known as She Professed Herself Pupil of the Wise Man. Unlike the previous Isekai, this one deals with a veteran wizard player who accidentally turned his character into a girl right before being summoned into the game for real. So, rather than being one of the renowned 9 sages that he built himself up to be, he instead now has the appearance of this innocent little girl. In identity, he's too afraid to reveal once belonged to one of the most skilled magicians. In a slightly different vein, Spirit Chronicles is an isekai where the protagonist's reincarnation fuses with the body of a person who's already living. But rather than completely overwriting who that person was like how we usually see, the protagonist's memories and personality are melded together with that of the person whose body he's taking over. A person who just so happens to have a tragic backstory involving revenge. So it's basically a generic fantasy plotline literally combining together with a generic drama and romance one. Coming out the season after that is the adaptation of the isekai light novel Faraway Paladin. It's the type of story that focuses more on the development of the main character, much like how Mushoku Tensei does it. What makes this protagonist unique though is that he was raised as the only human child amongst the city of the dead, eventually growing up to wonder who he is and why he was reborn so far away from human civilization. So we basically get to see his life story as he's brought up by the undead around him. Switching back to another video game isekai, it was recently revealed that we're getting an adaptation of the light novel Skeleton Knight in Another World, a story that follows a very similar premise to Overlord. This, however, deals far less with dark comedy and politics and focuses more on the action and adventure elements. Yes, we do have a gamer who suddenly finds himself transported to a fantasy world as an overpowered skeleton, but he doesn't immediately set out on a conquest for world domination. Instead, he's recruited to go on adventures, all while trying to find a way to fit in with the people around him. Now, aside from these isekai, we also got new trailers for several interesting new anime as well, one of which is called Liar Liar. It's one of the few that I'm looking forward to the most, because it's kinda like No Game No Life combined with Kakegurui. There's the whole idea of this academy where prestige is determined by how good you are at games, then a system in which your rank is wagered on it. So I guess in that regard it is a bit more similar to Kakegurui, but I don't think the games are limited to ones that only involve a gamble. One of the other anime that looks interesting is the new original series by Bandai Namco Arts called Tactop. Not much has been said regarding exactly what this story is about, but it looks like it's trying to incorporate music with fantasy in a similar way to how Vivi does. That's mainly why I'll be keeping an eye on it. For something a bit more rooted in fantasy though, there were a couple new trailers released for Record of Ragnarok and The Genius Prince's Guide to Raising a Nation Out of Debt. The latter is pretty much as the title states, so really all you need to know is that it's an adaptation of a comedic light novel. Then Record of Ragnarok is more like a massive tournament between god and man. But I'm sure a lot of you have already heard plenty about it considering how popular the manga is. To finish off the rest of trailers now, we have Studio Madhouse's adaptation of the manga The Vampire Dies in No Time, JC Staff's adaptation of the manga The Duke of Death and His Maid, Studio PA Works' original anime Aquatope of White Sand, and finally a new original card game anime called Build Divide Code Black, all of which you can check out using the links down in the description. Moving on to the new anime announcements now, there were quite a few unexpected big-name sequels getting confirmed. Like, Made in Abyss is getting both a second season and RPG video game. Then JoJo Part 6 was confirmed over livestream several weeks ago. What was by far the most unexpected though was the announcement of a continuation to the Madoka Magica movie series. The 2013 movie Rebellion is finally getting a sequel called Restoration of Walpurgis. Other movie sequels announced include one for Black Clover and another for the Quintessential Quintuplets. Then Anohana recently teased some sort of new project to celebrate their 10th anniversary. Aside from that, we also have Dr. Stone Season 3, the second part to Attack on Titan the final season, Season 2 for Restaurant to Another World, and finally a continuation to Science Fell in Love So I Tried to Prove It. The next list is all the manga announced to be getting an anime. There's Requiem of the Rose King, Akabe's Sailor Uniform, Love After World Domination, a couple of Cuckoos, This Healer's a Handful, The Great J Will Not Be Defeated, Blue Period, and finally Daimon. As for the light novels, all we really have is an adaptation for The Dawn of the Witch, then a few other originals that go by the names of Visual Prison, Do It Yourself, and Healer Girl. So that's pretty much all the news from the past month or so. If any of these caught your attention, then be sure to let me know in the comments. Now, as always, thank you so much for watching, and if you enjoyed this type of anime content, then you already know what to do. So, until next time, ciao!